Enjoy this narrated virtual tour of World War I-era foreign aircraft displayed at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. The museum is located on the right Patterson Air Force Base in southwest Ohio. See the planes that fought in the European skies during the war to end all wars. During the early days of World War I, both the French and British used two-seat Blériot for reconnaissance behind German lines. By 1915, more advanced aircraft relegated them to a training role. Members of the U.S. Air Service received their first instruction in the Blériot with clipped wings that prevented them from taking off. At full throttle, the fledgling pilots bounced across the airfield, learning to control the rudder with their feet. Once they could keep the Blériot on a fairly straight course, they advanced to an airplane that could leave the ground. The French-built Nieuport 28 was the first fighter airplane flown in combat by pilots of the American Expeditionary Force in World War I. It had a tendency to shed its upper wing fabric in a dive, so the French operated only a limited number, making them available to Allies. American pilots maintained a favorable victory-to-loss ratio with it. 26 Victory ace Captain Eddie Rickenbacker flew the Nieuport at one time in his career. This is a reproduction containing wood and hardware from an original. The SPAD-7 was a sturdy and rugged aircraft with good climbing and diving characteristics and was also a stable gun platform. The American volunteers of the French Lafayette Escadrille were flying the SPAD-7 in February 1918 at the time they transferred to the U.S. Army Air Service. It used a heavier, more powerful inline engine, resulting in a faster but less maneuverable plane. New tactics based on speed were developed to take advantage of the SPAD's power. This aircraft was restored by the 1st Fighter Wing located at the Selfridge Air Force Base. The SPAD-13 was essentially a larger version of the SPAD-7 with a more powerful engine. After the Nieuport 28 proved unsuitable, the Air Service adopted the SPAD-13 as its primary fighter. By the war's end, the Air Service had accepted 893 SPAD-13s from the French, and these aircraft equipped 15 of the 16 American fighter squadrons. This aircraft is painted in the markings of America's highest-scoring ace of World War I with 26 victories, Captain Edward V. Rickenbacker of the 94th Pursuit Squadron. The Avro 504K briefly saw combat in 1914 to 1915 but was quickly identified as obsolete and relegated to training duty. Its simple, sturdy construction and superior handling characteristics made it one of the most impressive and widely produced training aircraft of World War I. U.S. student pilots sent to Great Britain trained on them before advancing to combat aircraft. After the war, the Air Service brought a few back to the United States, and they remained in training service for several years. This aircraft is painted to represent one of the Air Service Avro 504K trainers flying at the 3rd Aviation Instruction Center in 1918. A superlative fighter, the Sopwith Camel was credited with shooting down 1,094 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied World War I fighter. Its nickname is derived from the distinctive hump forward of the cockpit that encased part of its Vickers machine guns. Tricky handling characteristics, as it was susceptible to spins, made the Camel a dangerous aircraft to fly. More pilots lost their lives learning to fly the Camel than did in combat. Earning a fearsome reputation, the Camel was widely distributed through British aviation squadrons and later also equipped several U.S. Army Air Service squadrons. U.S. Air Force personnel built the Camel on exhibit from original World War I factory drawings. It is painted and marked as the Camel flown by Lieutenant George Vaughan Jr. of the 17th Aero Squadron, America's second-ranking Air Service ace to survive the war. The de Havilland DH-4 was an ever-present element of the U.S. Army Air Service during and after World War I. It was the only U.S.-built aircraft to see combat during the war. Its primary uses were for daytime bombing, observation, and artillery spotting. Unfortunately, the early DH-4s had drawbacks, including the fuel system. The pressurized gas tank had a tendency to explode and a rubber fuel line under the exhaust manifold caused some fires. With inadequate funding to buy new aircraft, the Army Air Service continued using them in several roles during the lean years following the war. This reproduction DH-4B is marked as a photographic aircraft used by the 12th Aero Squadron in the early 1920s to take pictures of the U.S.-Mexico border and potential emergency landing fields. Halberstadt CL.IV supported German ground troops by attacking Allied positions. They had both fixed and flexible machine guns and would hand-drop grenades and small bombs, making them effective in the ground attack role. Their drawback was that they lacked armor, making them susceptible to ground fire. It became a hunted target of Allied pursuit squadrons, but it gave a very good account of itself in dogfights. CL-4s also served as interceptors against night bombing raids and served as a night bomber against troop concentrations and airfields near the front lines. This aircraft is marked as the CL-4 of the squadron leader of the Schlotstaffel 21, which is known to have engaged elements of the U.S. Army's 94th and 95th Aero Squadrons in mid-July 1918 during the Chateau Thierry battle. Fokker's nimble DR-1 earned a reputation as one of the best dogfighters of the war. Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, scored 19 of his last 21 victories flying the DR-1. Pilots were impressed with its agility, and several scored victories with the highly maneuverable triplane. By May 1918 the DR-1 was being replaced by the newer and faster Fokker D.VII. This reproduction is painted to represent the aircraft flown by Lieutenant Arthur Rahn, who is credited with 6 confirmed victories. A fierce German fighter, the Fokker D.VII made its mark quickly after entering service in 1918. With its high rate of climb, higher ceiling and excellent handling characteristics, German pilots scored a remarkable 565 victories over Allied aircraft during the month of August alone. It was so feared that the Versailles Treaty mandated the surrender of all D-7s to the Allies. This displayed reproduction aircraft is painted to represent the Fokker D.VII of Lieutenant Rudolf Stark, a squadron leader of JASTA 35B in October 1918. The Caproni Ca.36 was a late version of the Caproni line of bombers that had removable wing panels for ease of transportation and storage. Their World War I primary contribution was bombing Austrian airbases and were the first truly strategic bombers flown by American pilots. They remained in Italian Air Force service as late as 1929. Eberhart's SE5e was an American-built version of the SE5A designed by Britain's Royal Aircraft Factory. In 1922 the Eberhart Steel Products Company received a contract to rebuild 50 of the Army Air Service's SE5A aircraft for use as advanced trainers. It is painted to represent an SE5E of the 18th Headquarters Squadron in 1925. I hope you enjoyed this narrated virtual tour of the Air Force Museum's foreign World War I aircraft. If you would like to tour other aircraft in this series, you will find convenient links in the description section below this video. Here are YouTube suggested links on a similar topic that you may enjoy viewing.